I see. Okay. So how many members are supposed to be there, more or less?
We're not sure how many people join on, but at least 20, I would say.
Good. I'm looking forward to this experience. It's the first one for me via this apparatus.
Have you done anything else today? What was with the Holocaust centers?
Yes, they were actually today for just 1 minute on KDKA. It was a very powerful experience. What is moving today's event, that this was done mostly by the second generation children of Holocaust survivors. And that was very, very meaningful. Also, the emphasis also this year, if we would have had it as sailors and soldiers, to honor the veterans, the liberators who liberated concentration camps or fought in World War II. And what was interesting, that one of those fellows was an African-American fellow whom I met years ago before we survivors were publishing book Flares of Memories. And I met him accidentally sitting at Pamela's having some pancakes and coffee and tea. And he was wearing a jacket that says veteran of World War II. So I said, well, let's see what happens if I begin the conversation. And it turned out to be a very touching conversation. He was only 19 at the time. He told his story, so he's also read, someone read his story. He's probably deceased by now, so that was very touching for me to see, particularly African-American, honored in that way. And there are other children of survivors. Some of them read their parents' stories, because most of the survivors are in their late 80s, 90s. I'm one of the youngest active, probably not the youngest survivor. So it was very, very touching in its particular way.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yes, it's really, really, really something. We survivors published a book some years ago. It's called Flares of Memories. And it's probably out of print right now, but probably if you look at Amazon or somewhere, maybe you can find a copy of the book. Anybody who's into my story is there too. So if anybody wants to get the book, we can get together and give you my autograph for free. I'm just being funny. So anyway, so what made you folks get involved with BBYO?
Well, my brother was really involved with it, so he kind of forced me to do it, but then I kind of fell in love with it. So
he forced you? My goodness, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, he
encouraged you. How old is your brother?
He's 20 now. He goes to Pitt.
Oh, that's my school. That's where I graduated from years ago. And what grade are you in?
I'm a junior. I'm in 11th grade right now.
I see. Very nice. Very interesting. What high school do you go to?
Upper St. Clair in the South Hills.
Yes, I know where it is. That's very nice. And nice to see. I'm so happy to see in this case, to hear young people being involved in Jewish organizations, Jewish causes, because you are the future of the Jewish world. So you are going to make difference, I hope. I'm challenging you. How is that?
All right,
because there's so much hate is going on. I was just listening to a friend of mine. I don't use the internet because my computer doesn't work, and then so much ugly stuff is on tech in this hateful time. And I heard from somebody that they blame the Jews for this horrible virus. They call it the Jewish virus. Those hateful people. It's just so appalling. It's so disturbing. That's just I'm running out of words.
Kind of defies reason, to be honest.
Right. So it's important. That's a job that you young people have to fight it, not physically, but with wisdom and knowledge. because someone asked me what's my revenge of the Holocaust, or what's my response to the hate. I said, information and education. If you educate yourself, that's your weapon, because you
That's
can
very
use
true. I
word.
agree.
You can use a word in positive and educated way, not hateful, because hate is such a waste of time and energy. It's better to use for something really, really good. So that's why it's important for some of us survivors who are still able to speak and talk, to inspire young people to be involved and make a difference using positive words and educational words. And because, as you know, being 17, you are already understanding a lot of things, that words have meanings, and it's important to use the proper word and speak up if you see something that doesn't sound right. It's important to respond, but in educated, affirmative, but not in hateful way, because that doesn't accomplish anything. Rather the opposite, I think.
Hey,
Yeah.
Shulamit.
Yes.
I just wanted to. I'm Kaylee Warner. I don't know if you remember me, but I twinned with you for my bat mitzvah.
Really? Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm so tickled. Yes, that was how many years ago now? 4 years ago? 5 years ago?
Yeah, like 4 years ago, I guess.
Yes, I remember, and you gave me also a certificate, right?
Yeah, you did get one.
Yes, and if I remember this correctly, we met once or twice at Eaton Park on Murray Avenue. Do I remember this correctly?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yes, oh my
I heard
goodness.
that you were going to be on this call. I got so excited.
Well, I'm so excited that you got on this phone, that you see this. I have a feeling of satisfaction here that message that we survivors give to you young people, that it doesn't disappear once we're done with our just speaking to you some years ago before. So the message remains, and all that just, I am very touched by that.
And
that
Ethan,
was a wonderful,
my twin,
pleasant
he'll be here too later.
Yes, oh my goodness. Please give my regards to your parents.
Yeah, of course.
That's wonderful. That just made my day today. That's wonderful. I hope you'll be involved in school, or maybe when the school is over, because I understand all the schools are closed at the end of the school year, so you'll be a senior next year. So if you still have my phone number, we can arrange for me to speak to your class, to the seniors. What do you think of that idea?
I think that sounds awesome.
Yes, it's very important, because I always wanted to speak to seniors. I managed to speak to 11th graders, to younger. Because of my story, which you know, last year I even was able to speak to as young as 3rd and 4th grade. And what amazed me, I addressed, the concept of kindness, the words have meanings, of course, on their level. And I was amazed how much they understood the concept of making a difference and being kind. I was just almost like, wow, that's really terrific. But that's why it's so important, as long as I am able to. I have a little bit more of a physical challenge now. I maneuver via mobile chair right now. And I had a terrific experience with the young lady who also just now had a bat mitzvah in the word of Shalom. And also through this twinning like I did with you. And I never met the family. We did it via phone, because now we are not supposed to have visitors here, because I moved to an apartment for senior citizens. So we spoke on the phone on this last Thursday, and I was so impressed by this young girl. I was talking to a 13-year-old, but actually I by listening to her, I think I was speaking to a 17-year-old. Very impressive young lady, and how important to do this, but it's fun not to skip it. And how important this timing is, and she connected also with another child just like you did. And then I was able to hear her chanting from the Torah portion, the Haftorah, also via speakerphone, because I am just a landline. And she just blew me away. And then, of course, they asked me afterwards if there's anything I need. And, we can bake something for you. What do you like? And no, I can't refuse sweets, unfortunately. I'm just being funny right now. And what do you know? On Sunday, they called me up and brought me a sponge cake that she baked with her mother. So how is that? I thought it was very, very charming and very touching in view of this crazy virus situation we're living in.
So we're waiting a few more minutes because
Okay.
more people told me that they're gonna join, but Shulamit, you told me you wanted to like know everyone's names and what high school they go to. So if you guys want to like start with that.
Okay, I'm listening.
All right, I already went already, but I'm Eli, and I go to Upper St. Clair.
Oh, so you go together with your other friend to the same high school. That's nice.
No, I already said it already, but I was just starting.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I'm
who's next?
Ethan's
I'm here too.
No. So, and we go to Fox Chapel, but you knew that.
Okay, very good. That's an excellent school.
I'm Ian. I go to Alderdice.
Oh, that's right by me here. I live in Fort Worth in the apartments.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I'm Maya. I also go to Alderdice.
Oh, wonderful. So maybe I can come to your school. I'm only across the street here, almost. You can speak to your teachers. I spoke, as a matter of fact, in Alderdice right after the October 27 tragedy. I went there in January, and I spoke to 11th graders there. Okay, go ahead, next. Whoever is next.
All right, I'll go. I'm Sammy, and I go to Upper St. Clair, too.
I see. Okay.
I'm Austin, and I also go to Alderdice.
Oh, are most of you from Alderdice?
A lot of us are, yeah.
I'll go. I'm Rachel, and I go to Pine Richland.
To where?
Pine Richland.
Where is that?
It's like in the North Hills, so like north of the city, about half an hour.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Who's next?
Josh, you want to say what school you go to and where you're from? Like where you're from?
Hey, I'm Josh. I'm from Squirrel Hill, and I go to Alderdice.
Oh, I see. Okay, it looks like mostly Alderdice students.
Yeah.
So how many of you there now participating?
There's 16 people on now.
Wow, terrific.
I think we can start. If a few more people get on, they can.
Okay.
Here, if I have on my screen, I can share a picture of Shulamit since she couldn't join in with video, so you guys get to like see who she is, and not just hear.
Oh, where did you get the picture?
Online.
I see. Okay. Yes, if you want to hear more of what I've been doing, someone said you can get online. Just Google my name and see all the projects that I've been doing. But we go about it later on. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can start saying your story.
Okay. You want me to start now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is very unusual experience speaking like this. I hope I will come across as clear as I can. Can you all hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, as I said before, my name is Shulamit. Bastak is my last name, and I'm very pleased to be able to speak particularly to Jewish young people. As I said before, you are the future of the Jewish world, so it's important to be involved in your organization. So here's my story. I'm sure many of you probably studied about the Holocaust, so I won't give my perspective on the Holocaust, but basically tell my story. So I was born, to be exact, on August 25th, 1941, basically almost 2 months after Nazis entered that area on their conquest towards what was then Soviet Union, today Russia, because as you know, the war itself started on September 1st, 1939 by Nazi invasion of Poland. This was then the beginning of all those horrors. But that area where I was born, it started a little bit later, to be exact, on June 22nd, 1941, because at that time, that part of the city where I was born at one time before the Second War was under Polish control, then the Nazis came in, then later on became again part of Soviet Union, which is today independent country Lithuania. So here's my story goes. I was about 12 years old later on growing up in Poland when my parents began to tell me my story. So I'm not a camp survivor. I'm a hidden child survivor, someone who risked her life to save mine. So what happened here, shortly after they occupied that area, which I said before, June 22nd, 1941, I was born a little bit later, within a short period of time, they created Ghetto 1, what was then called Ghetto 1, Ghetto 2, and from that community, close to 60,000 Jews were slaughtered execution style. You can Google that on your own. If you will Google this Einsatzgruppe, and this were killing squads, or just nothing else but slaughtered just men, women, and children. And you can also Google on your own. It's spelled Ponary, which is a forest on the outskirts of city of. Today it's spelled Vilnius, Vilnius, but if you're Jewish, you would spell it Valna, Vilna, the famous Gaon, rabbinical genius from Vilna. There are kind of three ways of pronouncing that name, but I will refer to it as Vilna for me. So what happened here, they created Ghetto 1, Ghetto 2, so at a certain point, I guess my parents knew what was going to happen. Excuse me. And any normal parents wants to save their child because children kind of were the first in that slaughter because they didn't want to create future generation according to this crazy racist theories of Nazis. So here is where my story is. I was taken at a certain point, I don't know when, a few months or a month or so after I was born, because obviously I don't remember. Anybody here remembers when they were infants, when they were? Probably not. So I was taken to a basement and cellar and I was saved by Polish Roman Catholic. Now I'm saying Polish because there were various ethnic groups there. That part was mostly Roman Catholic, but there was a small ethnic Polish group, and then there were Lithuanians and some Germans and sizable Jewish communities. So this is where my story begins. I was simply locked up in the basement cellar, and she's the one who really kept me barely alive. And in those days, basement and cellars were used simply as a storage, sort of because not too many people had refrigerators to get produce from the country. So that's how people used in those days for the produce, milk, dairy products, eggs, what have you, from the local by farmers. So it was kind of like a storage area. It was dark, not much light, not much sound of life. So it was simply a deprivation of almost life itself, barely. Not seeing sunshine, not exposing to fresh air, being deprived of my parents' family. My parents were in the ghetto at the time, and it lasted for simply first couple years of my life because according to Mr. Hitler, I'm being very sarcastic here, because I was born Jewish, I was sentenced to death. I was not supposed to be living on this planet. But unfortunately for him, I was the lucky one. Of course, there are lots of other members of the family who perished. So let me go back a little bit to my family. I'll be speaking more on my father's side. He passed away already in this country. My mother chose not to speak a great deal. That's a lot of cases like this with survivors. On my father's side, there were 5 siblings total. He was the oldest, and I have an aunt in Israel who today is 97, who herself lost her first husband, and a child whose first name was also Shulamit. I learned this years and years later. And she survived the camps and was able to move to Israel, remarried. And out of that marriage are 3 children, grandchildren, and if I'm counting correctly now, 12 great-grandchildren. In other words, 3 generations born in the free Jews in the state of Israel. In between, there were 3 siblings. I learned much later in my life they were actually twins. They all perished, but one perished that I know of in a very horrific way. My aunt told me some years and years ago via overseas call to Israel they forced this particular group of Jews to go to a synagogue and put the match to the building, and I don't have to tell you what happens when you do that. And right there, I lost 3 generations of my close family. That would be my maternal grandmother, whose first name was Esther, and her one daughter, whose name was Hadassah, and a 3-year-old Hadassah's son, whose name was Israel. So by speaking about these things, I honor their memories, because I don't have any idea what they look like, what they sounded like. I don't know much about them, just by name. That's all. There are no grave sites to go to pay respects like normally when someone passes away. That's one of the reasons that I speak about these things, because I'm considering myself lucky. Any survivor who we ask them, why do you think survived? They all say luck. Just about almost every one of them. So anyway, so now to my own story. It was really the privation of the first few years of your life, like all of you who were born, even before you were born. Everybody was excited about mother expecting a child, and a child was born. Everybody gets happy, excited, little gifts, a joy and excitement and sound of life. And I was simply deprived all of it for the very first few years of my life, not seeing anything, not hearing very much. The only human touch that was provided to me was just by this nun, but she also had to be very careful, because there were rules, one of those numerous Nazi rules, that for non-Jews who risked their lives, that if you help the Jews, there will be the end of you. And in many cases, they wiped out, they killed other families. So she truly risked her life, because in those days, nuns were wearing those long habits, and it was very easily to recognize a nun, because they were very religious Catholic women. So she truly risked her life. So this lasted until the end of war in that particular region, because it was about summer or so, end of summer of 1944, because the war itself ended on May 8, 1945. So here's what happened. My parents were in a local labor camp, slave labor camp. Luckily for them, they were not sent to concentration camps or other type of camps. They were lucky. My aunt was not lucky. She ended up in some other concentration camp. So my father was electrical engineer. Maybe that's what saved me. My mother had a low degree. It was simply pure luck. It was some kind of a local factory, slave labor factory that people work, and they were lucky they survived. So what happened here, and like in any case, were many children who were given up to non-Jews. The parents who did survive, thousands and thousands and thousands didn't. They tried to look for their children. So apparently my father didn't find me, and my parents didn't find me where I was hidden. And here's what happened. The nun didn't know what has become of my family, so she decided to bundle me up and put me on the banks of the river. And that kind of reminds me of the story of our little Moses from our Torah. You know, he was a hidden child of sorts. So she bundled me up and put me on the banks of a river, and there was this Lithuanian fellow who apparently found me, and he took me to a Lithuanian Catholic orphanage, because that region, Polish folks and Lithuanians are mostly Roman Catholics, very deeply religious folks. So what happened here, this man took me to this Lithuanian Catholic orphanage. I was given some kind of a Lithuanian name. I'm glad I don't remember. I was barely alive. I was really in the bad physical shape, malnourished physically, and because I was deprived of all this fresh air, sunlight, all this normal thing that everybody experienced, even if you come from a very poor family and there's everybody around you. But I was simply deprived of all of it, not even having much toys, not hugging anything, just deprived of everything that normally even the basic needs that an infant born receives. I had none of it almost. So, and I was really in a very, very bad shape. I was scared of a lot of things because I was deprived of the hearing sounds of anything. I remember this big people asked me, do I remember anything? and it's just, but I don't remember much. But the only thing I do remember was that, excuse me, someone was just calling me on my iPhone, so that's okay. I remember that I was scared of sound of a telephone because I didn't hear much of those sounds. So there was some kind of a toy they wanted up, and I was scared of that sound. Even today, I don't like unexpected sudden noises to this day, and I don't like to be in too close spaces myself. I like to go when I go to doctors' offices. So that's as early. I remember being on a train that took us when the borders changed, when the war was over. So what happened here, it's like God and luck were on my side. So what happened here, when the war was over, so my father was, looking for me. Apparently didn't find me. It was easier in those days for men than for women to maneuver around for some obvious reasons. And my father, by luck, walked into that orphanage, purely by luck. God and luck, I would say. But how do you recognize a child that you have not seen for almost 4 years? And I looked not as a normally developed child at the age of 3, almost 4, would look like, or should look like. But apparently, how did he recognize me? Because they gave me some kind of Lithuanian name, so I didn't. My father recognized me only by the fact that I had a birthmark. He knew what it was and where it was. That's how he recognized me. If he would not have recognized me, I am more than sure I would have grown up in some kind of orphanage somewhere in that Lithuanian, what was then Lithuanian Republic of Soviet Union, now Lithuania. And who knows what would have become of me. I have no idea, nor do I want to guess, because it's the past. I don't want to dwell on if, what would have happened. So luckily we got reunited, and borders changed again after the Second War. Because it became communist regime. So anyone who was Polish citizen before the war, whether you were Polish or Jewish, you had a choice. You could move to the new area. So that's what happened. I remember being on the trains. And then also the next thing I needed to undergo is rehabilitation, because I was really deprived of so many things that normally at that stage of child development you need. So I was in a facility that, for example, one of the things I remember I had to undergo to receive what they call artificial sun. We would call it today sunroom, but under supervision, because I'm deprived of that. Sun is important for your development. And I had to learn how to be kind of a child again. My parents came to visit me. That was kind of readjustment again for the parents, how to be parents again, for a child get used to your parents. This is one of those tragedies of the Holocaust, of many hidden children. You can Google on your own. There are numerous stories and research done on specifically. It depends also on the age of those hidden children. Some of them suffer immensely psychologically, even to much later. Some didn't. It depended on each person. Each one has his or her own story, how they developed into children and later young adults and adults. So then we moved to another part of Poland where I grew up. Had to learn the language and all. Went through school, part of elementary school, and then 9th or 10th grade, because there's some kind of form of anti-Semitism, political one in Poland. The decision was made that I should go to Israel. That was in 1959. So then I went to Israel. I lived there about 5 years, and my father had relatives here. So after serving in the Israeli army and everything else, I came here to America. I discovered America, and America discovered me in November 63, and here I am. I didn't speak any word of English. Yes, no, okay, this was the extent of my English vocabulary. Had to finish the rest of my high school, and then my important idea of being educated. I went to night school, University of Pittsburgh, and then later on I wanted to be a social worker working with geriatric older folks because of my earlier experience and anti-Semitism. And later on been engaged since 98? I forget now how long ago. It's 30-some years I've been speaking to all kinds of students, all ages, adults, young, different schools, emphasize what was the worst in the Holocaust and To me, it was the issue of those who initiated this horrific event and executed in such a great, horrific efficiency, those who cooperated with the Nazis, and then those who chose to save us at their own risk. We call them righteous among the nations. Has anybody been to Israel in your group? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of us have.
Yes.
Been to Yad Vashem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Yes.
there's one part in the museum when they honor those who in Hebrew it's called Chasidei Umot Haolam, righteous among the nations. So I do this to honor this nun because she risked her life. I was about 14 years old when I later met her. She wanted to look at me, kind of, who's this 14-year-old girl now, whose life she saved. So I honor her memory, because if it wouldn't be for her, I wouldn't be here speaking to all those thousands of students over the years. So that's kind of basic my stories. I've been going to school since about 85, I think it is, 85, 86, and delivered the message of speak against the hate, ignorance, and prejudice, because to me it's such a waste of time and energy. I always ask the students, what's opposite of hate? They all tell me love. So use that and make a difference. You have some questions for me?
I have one.
Okay.
So as a survivor, what perspective can you offer our generation with the recent rise of anti-Semitism?
Yes, I was expecting that question. For those of you young Jews, educate yourself in terms of our own faith, our own culture, and enrich yourself with knowledge. Knowledge is the key. And use your computer skills, because there are obviously some hateful websites. There is such thing as misinformation. And if you research on your own, if you become informed and read as much as you can, either through books or even to correct the right websites, educate yourself. That's your weapon. And learn more about our own history. We have a heritage of 5,000 years, almost. Our own history, our own heritage. People ask me one question, and this was asked by a non-Jew. Said, what is being Jewish means to you? Because some people it's only religion. So I said it's not just religion, it's heritage, it's history, and it's culture. We have such a rich heritage. Not just obviously the Torah, but through centuries, how much contribution we have made to the world. Equip yourself with knowledge. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
And be secure who you are as young human beings and as Jews.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to go?
Go ahead.
No, you can go.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Have you been able to reconnect with any other hidden children since it happened?
That's very interesting question. I was not able to get to some of the conferences that were held, but we have one hidden child survivor in our community here, and she's just about a year younger than I am. We have here actually a few hidden children survivors in our community. One is from France, one was saved in Greece by non-Jews, and one is a survivor who is from France. They're much older than I am. I am kind of the youngest one. In some cases, I was old enough to be a survivor and a child of survivors. And each one has an amazing story. This one survivor that I was involved, by the way, when Spielberg made the movie Schindler's List. How many of you have seen the movie? Schindler's
I've
List?
seen it.
I strongly recommend that you do see it. As a result of that film, he established a foundation called Survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation. Now it's run by University of California. I forget the exact name. You can search that on the internet. You have all your computer skills. 50,000 survivors have been interviewed, and I interviewed one of them, two of them, one from Greece and one from Poland. And this was again an example when I was emphasizing that during the Holocaust was what was the very worst and the very best in human beings this one person, I will just use her first name. She lost her mother because someone killed her mother when she was only 6 months old during the time. Yet another Polish woman somewhere on a farm saved her life, took her in, and there was an instance in the history of this person that they were going somewhere, and this other woman was with her infant, and the Nazis wanted to kill, and she held on to Sarah, and Sarah survived today. She lives here in Pittsburgh. She's now retired. And again, of not so much the hidden children, but again, what was the very best in human being. I have a close friend who is now deceased, who is from the same city where I was born in Vilna. We met long time ago at the first gathering of Jewish Holocaust survivors, and we became very close friends because she knew some of my relatives way before the war. And I visited her on my one of the last visits to Israel some 8 or 9 years ago, 10 years ago, and she was telling me her story. She was on that very last aspect of the Holocaust. She was on a death march, and they were near what was then Polish-German border, because it's different after the war. And this one Polish fellow grabbed her, pulled her out, like she was lucky she was wearing shoes. She was on the death march, and he took her to one house. They said no. Then they took her to another house, and the woman saved her life, not just saved her life, but gave her a sense of what human beings should feel like. She put her in normal bed. She wounded. She healed her wounds in a very small, primitive way. And the woman, she says her name is Lucia, may she rest in peace, passed away in her 90s. Said, you know, I'm Jewish, and I'm translating here from Polish to English for you. And she says, you know, I'm Jewish. And the woman says, I did not ask you what womb you came from. You understand here? What she said, that it's not important in a very primitive way. She gave her a sense of humanity when she was able, after all this camp, to sleep in a very basic, normal bed as human beings sleeps when they go at night to sleep. Again, she was honored by Yad Vashem in Israel. I was not able to honor the nun who saved my life, but I honor her every time I speak.
Jess, did you have?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? I hope it's kind of difficult. It's different because usually when I speak, I like to see somebody in face to face, because I don't see your reaction, facial reactions, or I'm just hearing your voices. So it's a first type of experience speaking to a group via phone. Okay, go ahead. Anybody else has questions or comments?
Shulamit, first, that it's so powerful every time I hear that story. Like, thank you so much for sharing. I was wondering what it was like when you first got when you reunited with the nun who helped you.
Yes, I was 14 years old. We went back to Vilna, which then, after the war, it became part of Soviet Union. It was then, Soviet Union had like 15 republics, so that they called it Lithuanian Republic of Soviet Union. Now it's independent country. So we went to, I was about maybe 14, 15 years old when we went back. And my father looked her up. She was a Catholic nun. She's obviously deceased now, that's for sure. And I remember that she wanted to, we were visiting with my late mother's relatives who later on came to America. And for some reason, she wanted me to stand on a chair. I remember that. I don't know why she wanted that way, but that's what she wanted. She kind of wanted to look at this girl whose life she saved. And I always remember that. It's again, for example, one person making a difference. That reminds me of this famous quotation of our ancient rabbis. You probably may have heard it. If you save one life, it is as if you have saved the world. If you can imagine how many of those young Jews, children, would have become such great, maybe more Nobel Prize winners. We have sizable, good proportion of us Jews who have Nobel Prize winners. You can Google this on your computer with a question, Jewish Nobel Prize winners. I'm just giving you an idea. All of a sudden, I wasn't thinking that way. It just came to my mind this very second. See what you find out. And then the contribution that they made, the scientists, for example, one person who invented cure against polio, Dr. Salk, who here from University of Pittsburgh, Jewish fellow, and some other individuals. And so we are making tremendous contribution to this world, but unfortunately there are lots of hateful people who don't particularly like us, blame us for this virus, Jewish virus, or this kind of, excuse me for my English, but nonsense. I'm being very direct here. I'm not being very polite on that issue. Sorry about that. Okay, go ahead. Some more questions?
I have a question. How can the younger generations, what can we do to keep the memories of survivors alive?
Very important question. Again, there is so much material research done. Also, I tell you what you can do. You can probably Google to the HaShoah Foundation on your computer, and I interviewed myself here about 60 of my fellow survivors for that project after he made the movie Schindler's List. If you get a copy of that movie, that will be also important kind of learning about this. But watching the interviews, HaShoah Foundation interviews. For example, we have here Cantor Moshe Taube. How many of you know that name?
What name?
Moshe Taube. He was a cantor at Bet Shalom. He was on Schindler's List. He was one of those what they call Schindler's Jews. And if you Google Cantor Taube, you may find an interview with him. You can also see we have a Holocaust Center here, right here in Greenfield. And we have remembering every time you have Holocaust, the Yom HaShoah like we have today. You can Google this today. You go to Facebook and then go to the Holocaust Center and see what we've done. And today was so meaningful because, in a different way, because it was done today by second generation. These are children of Holocaust survivors. Because we had a sizable group of survivors who were able to go and speak to schools, but unfortunately, we all know nobody lives forever. So they were able to speak, and there are interviews done. You can search, as I said before, through the HaShoah Foundation. Or also research. You can go, we have a Holocaust Center here, and you can get the information through them. And once you are educated, you can educate others, involve the young people appropriately for their ages. And those kids, I was so amazed. In one school I was speaking to, was a fourth and fifth grader. The fifth grader already knew the meaning of the word Holocaust, and he knew about concentration camps. That just blew me away. I said, I don't believe that I heard it. And that's good. So simply use your computer skills, high tech, to educate yourself. And today there is no excuse not to know, as long as you are getting it to the right website. And of course we have libraries, and that's what can help you. We have a wonderful collection of things. At the Holocaust Center we have a librarian, and also you can request, I am willing to come to speak to your schools. There's only one minor challenge here because I have physical challenge. I ambulate via a mobile chair, or I have also a regular wheelchair, but you know what they say, when there's a will, there's a way. And what is important, the work that is being done by non-Jewish educators, they are just a gem of this world. They're just do, I would call, a sacred work in educating in public schools to non-Jewish students. They're just amazing, amazing individuals. I have profound respect for those, because they're making the difference, educating the students. And whenever a survivor able to come, so I am always willing and able, as long as transportation is provided. And so far, I've never had a problem. I've been doing this. And also, I have an interesting project, because when during that time, I didn't have any toys there, nothing to hold on to. I'm sure you can go back to your early part of your life when you had your teddy bears or whatever, your favorite toys to hug when you were little and upset. So before mom and dad come and give you a hug, you had your whatever favorite animal. I had none of it. No, there's nothing to hold on to if you were upset. So I bought myself a very first teddy bear only when I was 22-year-old. I came to this country right there on Forbes Avenue, Squirrel Hill. There's that Randall's Toy Store. Bought myself first teddy bear. And I was speaking in one of the schools, and it happened to be someone that I know from the community. And yeah, I like to hear reflections, you know, what did you learn from my visit here? But this time she did something very unusual. She comes in and brings this black bag. I said, what's in it? Open up. I'm opening up. I put one teddy bear, 18 teddy bears gift to me. I said, oh, wow, wow, that's, and you know what 18, if you put in Hebrew letters, it's high, life. So I took one of those teddy bears to the lunchroom in GCC, and this one survivor liked that teddy bear. And so what I'm going to say, it's a gift. I gave it to her. And I shared that experience with a close friend of mine who used to work in shelter for abused women. And she gave me the idea of collecting teddy bears. So every time I would go to school, and then I would bring time and decide where it's going. But then at a certain point, I said to myself, wait a minute, kids collect, let them decide where it's going. So for about 20 years now, I started in about 85, I think, or so. I'm losing the track of time here. I think by now I collected at least 20,000 teddy bears. They gone to all kinds of places. One school sent that to shelter for abused women, one to a family house. The students decide where it's going.
That's
and
awesome.
They get together, they think it through, and it's just making a difference. Because when we had this tragedy here, one of the people who were killed tragically lived in my building here. So I gave one of those teddy bears to his daughter, and that provided. Another teddy bear went to the gentleman who was wounded. He's a nurse. His wife works at the Jewish Family Community Services. I gave that teddy bear because it gave a comfort. It's not for everybody, but for example, family house where people whose loved ones are in hospital, I give comfort to them while they're waiting for the recovery of their loved ones. So that's what I've been doing, and I feel really good about that.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Anybody, any questions, any comments? I have a question for you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to challenge for each and every one of you, since you are together in various schools. So obviously, schools are closed now, but when the next school year starts, maybe you can think of a teddy bear project and decide where it's going and invite me to speak, and we can take it from there. What do you think of that idea?
We'd love to.
Yes,
So
I love that idea. Thank you.
So anything else you would like to tell me or ask me?
No, but
earlier you brought up the Jewish Nobel Peace Prize, or just Nobel Prize winners in general. And I looked it up, and I found out that 20% of winners were Jewish, and only 20% of the population is Jewish. So I thought that was
there you go.
So thank you for that.
There you go. So you see, maybe some of you will be future go to maybe sciences and discover some worthy of Nobel Prize literature. Maybe you will become some future leaders. Maybe some of you young ladies and young men of maybe you will have the first Jewish female president of the United States. What do you think of that idea?
I like it.
Or maybe first start with the vice president and then maybe president. I'm just being funny right now.
Anyone else?
Any more that you have?
I think that's it. Thank you so much, Shulamit. We really love talking to you and hearing your story, and it's amazing. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, good luck, and maybe because summer will be coming, so you'll have a little bit more time. You can choose what kind of project you want to be involved with in some way, in your own personal way, making a difference. For example, like this young lady whose bat mitzvah I went to, her mitzvah project, you know what it was? When everything will get done and settled, she wants to do fundraising for the Tree of Life Synagogue. So that's the answer. Whatever, use your heart and your intellect, and you combine that your heart and your intellect, some good things will result.
Okay, thank you so much. We really love this and hope to see you after this whole coronavirus thing ends.
Yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. As they say, we shall overcome. You remember we were slaves in the land of Egypt, so we are not exactly slaves to this, but we've gone through this worst, particular survivors. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think good things will come to us, I hope.
Yes. Okay, and thank you.
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so you take care.
Thank you.
You too.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe.